So for this part of the systems life cycle, we're going to look at development and testing. So you are going to identify types of testing, explain the purpose of each type. Okay, so now for Silver, you're going to explain and give examples of each type of testing, and then you're going to apply your knowledge to past exam paper questions. So, introduction now. The development stage is also known as the implementation stage. So this is when things start getting implemented, so they start getting made. Not installed, but made. They're made and they're tested. So each stage of this cycle will have been created, and basically now they're being tested. Now this stage can overlay the design stage, because obviously when you're designing a system, you may be making it pretty much at the same time to test it to see how it works, and then making changes from there. So how do we test data? Well, the system's been developed and it needs to be tested before the installation stage, because you would have developed the system, but there's no point in installing it if it's not working properly and it's full of errors. So the data will be created for the purpose of testing. Okay, and this is known as test data. So it's not real data, it's just data that's created for the purpose of testing. So and it'd be based on data that is going to be put into the system every day. Okay, so like for example, dates of birth, genders, that kind of thing. And then when they run calculations, so if they wanted to see people born after the 12th of January 1993, then obviously that can be calculated and done. So what do they test for? Okay, so well, for a start, they need to test the valid data. So this is the data that's within the boundaries of any validation, for example. So they want to test that that is being accepted and processed how it should be. Then they want to test for invalid or abnormal or erroneous data. Okay, so this is data that may be kind of just out, it will be outside of the boundaries. Okay, then they want extreme valid data. So this is the data that is on the edge of the boundaries. So for example, if you're testing numbers 1 to 10, valid data, so will be data say between 2 and 9, that is normal data. Invalid data will be the data that is basically say 0 and 11, and extreme data will be 1 and 10. Then they want extreme invalid data, so that is the data really that is beyond the limits of any acceptability, like minus numbers, that kind of thing. Okay, so here's an example. So if we're looking at invalid data, okay, so this is data that is like if they accept yes or no, or N and Y, then invalid data, or abnormal data, will be M, okay, because it's not Y and it's not N. And here's another example of data that they may test. So this data will include the calculations of these dates. So any dates between, which will include obviously the 1st of January 2017 and the 31st of December 2017. So valid would be the 12th of May, because that is right in the middle of the boundary there. Invalid would be say the 15th of the 7th 2012 or the 4th of the 6th 2019, because that is completely outside. Okay, so extreme valid, okay, would be on the boundaries. Okay, those exact dates would be between. And then extreme invalid, okay, would be the 21st of the 12th 2016 and the 1st of the 1st 2018. Okay, right, so what do they test for? Well, they need to test, for example, more queries, for example. Now, most systems will have some form of a search function, you know, where you need to search for certain things. So here's a record, for example. So here's some 7 records, for example. Sorry, not a record, a table. Here's a table with 7 records. So we've got genders, we've got a mixture of males and females, and then we've got year groups, 11, 12 and 13, and we've got 1 year 10 in there. So a query, for example, is they want to find any male that has scored a C and above, okay? Maybe they want to find any male in year 11 that has scored an A, okay? Maybe they want to find all students in year 12 that are female, okay? Or maybe they want to find high scoring males, so for example grade A males, any year group. Okay, so this is the sort of things that they're testing. So they'd want to make sure that any of this data that they're asking for, like I said, all males in year 11, the only ones that would appear would be records 5 and 1, because they're both males and they're in year 11. Now obviously we can see here what is going on. But if you've got a record of hundreds and hundreds of students, you ain't going to want to look through that yourself. Right, so now we're going to look at types of testing. Now here's black box testing. So black box testing will require the test data to be input and checked that the outputs are expected. Now the person doing this will have no working knowledge, okay, of the internal structures. So the user, so this may be like a user type of testing. So the user will not know how the system's made, but they will test it to see if it works. So like for example, if there's a button that does a reset and it will clear the data. So black box testing, as I said, could be seen as an end user's perspective. So they may get an end user to come in and test it and say, does that work? Does that work? Okay. Now, white box testing is the almost opposite of black box testing, because white box testing, these people will know the structures of how it works, and therefore they should know how to debug it. So they may be testing different types of data, such as integers, queries, that kind of thing, and they should see the outcome and they should know how it works and basically should know how to debug it. So, and obviously they will have knowledge of how any validations and so on have been set. Now, what I've got here is, I got this from Geek for Geeks, and this is the difference between white box and black box testing. So if you want to look at this in depth, obviously pause the video now and make notes as you wish. Alpha testing. So this testing is in-house testing that takes place before the software is released for the beta testing. Okay, so this isn't. So I'm sure you've been on sites before where it says the beta version. Okay, so that's the version that they're testing. So you're the user and you'll be testing that. Okay, so the alpha testing will take place as an in-house testing. So this will be carried out by employees of the company making the software. Okay, and usually it's by those not involved in the creation of the software, because obviously you need to see it with fresh eyes and from a different person's perspective. You know what the software should be doing. You know how it works. Okay, but does the end user? So you're always going to need perspective as somebody that is outside of that circle. Okay, and any necessary automations are made before the beta testing. So this is the last stage where they feel there's nothing more they can do in-house, and then they've got to put it out to test. Okay, so it will follow a test plan using test data. Now, the beta testing, this is the testing that is the second phase, okay, which a sample of end users will try the application out. So for example, when I've gone onto YouTube and they've made a new YouTube studio, you can obviously do the beta testing version, or you can use the version we've already got. Okay, so it tends to be a pre-release that's carried out, but obviously it has to go live and use real volumes of data to see exactly how it will cope. So before, when I've been on YouTube and obviously used the new version, it's if people upload a video, say thousands of people upload a video, can this software cope? Okay, so now the aim is to basically place this application in the hands of the real users. Okay, so the development team, if there's any flaws or issues, from the user's perspective, like if they report any bugs, they can be fixed. Okay, so test plans. Now, obviously test plans have to be put in place. So there will be a test number. So they might say, okay, there's 50 tests we have to carry out in here. They describe what the test is and how the test works, the type of each test. Like, so for example, it could be button, it could be query, it could be search, it could be inputting of text, it could be inputting of data that needs to be validated, and so on. Okay, so the data will be input, and there should be an expected result. Okay, so for example, if I select something other than yes or no, so if I type in other than yes or no, like maybe, then it should validate that and say, no, we can't accept that data. Okay, then simply if the test has passed or failed. Now here's an example test plan. Okay, so here's 3 tests. So for example, enter incorrect mark, like -1. Obviously there's no such mark as -1, it's 0 or above. So test mark input function, and then expected result should be that it's been rejected. Then here in the actual result it will say whether it's passed or failed, or here it might say passed or failed. Okay, so now you've got a worksheet. So on a worksheet I've given you some questions to do, and there's 2 past exam paper questions. Underneath this video in the description there is a link to the worksheet, and then there's also a link to the answers for the exam questions for you to self-assess. Very best of luck.